any product-based company, they have to understand the complexity and nuances of the industry for which they are building the product.
Right.
And then they have to come up with the solution.
And till date, it's always been the problems of the West, if you could solve, right, through innovation or through a solution, that gets you paid.
The other aspect is where India was excelling without the spiritual aspects. Your material aspects, only play so much. And that's where, our country was, so great in terms of having, so many thoughts, evolutions around,
some of the world's biggest libraries.
Absolutely.
Hi friends, I have today Mr. Ganesh Kashyap. So Mr. Kashyap heads India delivery and he's also the head of Global R&D Center for Landis+Gyr. Welcome Mr. Ganesh. It is great to have you. Before we start, why don't you give a brief background of the organization that you've given 25 years to. Let's start a little bit about Landis+Gyr because that's not a name that's commonly heard, but I believe Landis+Gyr is doing a lot of work behind the scenes, helping not just grand Indian plans of finding sustainability in power development, but I'm sure Landis+Gyr is doing a lot globally also. So why don't we quickly have a brief about that?
So just to give a bit of an overview, this is my 26th year. I completed 26th in December.
Right.
So Landis+Gyr is primarily like a company, one of those companies that's 125 years plus in the industry.
Right.
Not too many companies are
survived that long.
And, the reason being, the company has been transforming itself.
Right.
Just to give a bit of a background, Landis+Gyr started as a hardcore metering company.
Right.
Electric meters primarily.
Yes.
It used to be called as the Rolex of meters. It was from Switzerland.
Okay.
It's all about precision instrumentation, right? So they used to do the meters in such a way, the mechanical meters. It used to be called as the Rolex of meters.
Okay.
Very high quality, high precision in terms of measurement and accuracy. Now, as things evolve, when the whole electronics came into play, the company stepped up, and then from mechanical it became electromechanical, and then became digital.
Right.
And from digital, as things started, in the internet era caught up, now the company started transforming.
Okay.
Now, the best part is this company was acquired and then merged and then reacquired. So a lot of transformations happened.
Okay.
Now, through those transformations, there were several acquisitions that basically happened on the solution space.
Okay.
When I say solution space, it's basically those days people used to talk meter as a standalone. But then the early pioneers, started bringing communications to the meters.
Okay.
And then bring it all together, in a form where, it made it easy. So initially it started as, we will simplify the meter readers' jobs.
Right.
But then it became much more and beyond in terms of sustainability and energy management, demand control and all that stuff. So today, Landis+Gyr is not a metering company anymore. So Landis+Gyr is a solutions company that also does meters.
I see.
So that's the distinction. So pretty much in a nutshell, if I have to summarize, Landis+Gyr is like a utility Internet of Things. They use the terminology IoT.
Okay.
It's a utility Internet of Things, utility IoT company that provides end-to-end solutions for the utilities. When I say end-to-end, it's all the way from the device to edge to enterprise or chip to cloud as a solution to the industry. So we manufacture meters. We have our own network, similar to Airtel, Jio, Vodafone. We build our own standard network, which basically is all IP enabled.
Wow.
And then we build our own routers, gateways, like base stations.
Right.
And then we deploy those networks so that we establish those connectivity.
Okay.
The only difference is in a normal cellular network, people move to get the connectivity.
Right.
Here it's all fixed.
Right.
So we have different way of looking, all this stuff. So we build algorithms and capabilities to manage all of that.
Right.
It's like a neural network.
Okay.
In the network side. And then we bring the data back to the enterprise. Now, with last few years, data has become a lot more important. So typically for a utility, Landis+Gyr produces almost like 45% of data through our systems.
Okay.
That's a lot. So which means we started building more capabilities based on the data that we collect from these meters.
Right.
It tells you, the complete footprint of how things are happening.
Right.
And very fascinating. In fact, people think that like meter is a meter, but think of it like a iPhone. It's like a smart meter.
Okay.
The meter has three functionalities, like measurement, thinking, and talking.
Okay.
So measurement is like high sensitivity on the lines. So now the current generation of meters, we have capabilities to stream the digital data in bits the way you measure.
Okay.
Earlier you used to sample it at like a larger rate, so it was all like bigger blocks. But today the granularity is such that on the speed of the line measurement you can stream it. So that measurement capability has increased.
Interesting.
Now, since the measurement capability has increased, we have an AI and ML engine inside the meter itself.
I mean, there's so much data flowing. The obvious thing to do is build intelligence.
Built-in intelligence. So that intelligence takes the entire stream and can also do sampling.
Okay.
And then does the intelligence to disaggregate the load. So it learns, and over a period of time,
makes it
can
more efficient.
Tell you whether you have a washing machine in your home, how many air conditioners, dishwashers, all the other appliances that you have at your home. It knows the signature.
Right.
It will read the signature, understand the signature, and then communicate that. That's the talk part. The think is this. Then the talk is we have multiple communication technologies that we support. One is the RF network that we have, but we also support cellular and other technologies there. So, but anyway, it gets all the data there. Now, the best part is this is what we call as the edge intelligence.
Okay.
Now, with the edge intelligence, it will package the data, get it across to the cloud.
Yeah.
The cloud adds the enterprise intelligence, and then will come back and say, okay, this signature of washing machine is a LG washing machine.
Acha.
This signature of a dryer is a Bosch dryer.
Interesting.
So it will do a deep learning.
Wow.
And then at some point of time when your bill comes, like after 6 months, you will have a complete breakdown of
which appliance is using how much?
Appliances is using how much based on the brand names.
Beautiful. Beautiful. So, I mean, while there's a lot of, I think, technical, this conversation is getting a little technical, so might as well bring it a little back to non-technical realm. But there's, one fantastic thing that comes out, an organization which is 125 years old, and look at how it has evolved, right? So, a lesson that, all the young entrepreneurs can learn who are just starting out, I'm sure not a lot of us who start out as entrepreneurs have a vision of an organization surviving 20, 50 years. But look at, how Landis+Gyr has evolved. And I think one of the factors that this organization has come so far is its culture. And while the organization does great work in terms of, I'm flabbergasted at the kind of detail at which, our just an electricity meter could, come up with data that could tell us if our even washing machine is working efficiently or not, maybe, to, becoming an organization such that, it keeps smart people like you around for 25 years, and you tell me that you're probably going to retire from this organization, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So it's sustainability not just at the environmental level but also at people level, which is, I think, the beauty of this.
Absolutely. People form the core of this organization. In fact, now at the end of the day, I'm not the only person, but globally, you will find people who had a long career in the company. Especially we had few people in our Switzerland office who basically joined the company right off college, retired from the company.
Wow.
Which is very rare thing.
Yes,
that
these
you see these
That's
days.
Right. That's right.
And then I feel that is the most important aspect because the company gives enough headroom and flexibility at the end of the day. That's very important.
You see, for an organization to evolve, and the evolution, I believe, is taking it's picked up pace so much in the last few years that you need that kind of continuity of good people to hang around to be able to see that continuity. You
Correct.
can't have mercenaries come in every 2 years and leave for another higher paying job. The kind of I think thing that our software development companies, pure software development companies see. I believe having those kind of mercenaries in an organization,
Correct.
finds it very difficult for that kind of continuity to come. And this continuity, I think, is an important part in the longevity of this organization's
Absolutely.
being
Absolutely. Like, I think
125 years and still going strong.
Absolutely. You hit the nail on the head. Like, at the end of the day, the clear distinction, again, it's not necessarily Landis+Gyr, but any product-based company versus a service-based company is like, the product-based company needs to evolve. They have to understand the complexity and nuances of the industry for which they are building the products.
Right.
And then they have to come up with the solution. If you're spending just 2-3 years in an organization or like very short lifespan and moving out, you haven't gotten to the depth and breadth of the context of like how things are operating, be it healthcare industry or whatever it is. It's not like you can graze the top of the grass and then like just move on. You need to really like get to the depth of like what the products are, and that's where I think probably a lot of people miss out. I think maybe over a period of time, I think they all will learn, in my opinion, primarily. If you look at the way growth happens, India is like very different. In the US, you will have people who basically can have a lot of that horizontal growth, but India, with the kind of socio-economic strata coming into play, after a point of time, if people don't have that deep-rooted knowledge of a company, industry, and then the domain, and then the technology or the product, they will be left out. And because there is so much of young talent coming up, I think if somebody has to make them irreplaceable, in an organization or an industry, they have to build that deep-rooted knowledge. And that is very, very important. I think at least like for the youngsters, they will learn over a period of time, because it's like survival of the fittest at the end of the day, and they all will be become outliers at some point in time when they don't have that kind of a knowledge, because the companies will start expecting them to deliver at that level as they grow up and mature out in their cycle.
Understood. So we've talked a little about the organization that you've given most of your working career to. Why don't we talk a little bit about how you reached here? And there's some very interesting things I see on your on the route that you took to reach Landis+Gyr. After you did your masters, first of all, interesting. The time you did your masters in computer science, I don't think computer science was that big a deal.
It was not. That's a very interesting thing, because I was at a crossroad where I had to take a curriculum in instrumentation engineering, which had more of a market value, and computer science was brand new. And this was like the time when the entire computer science curriculum was introduced by the DRDO and Ministry of Defense. So they picked up 5 universities across the country, and they wanted to infuse about 100 students every year through those streams. So I came out from Mysore University. It's one of the university which was part of the DRDO umbrella. But then the vision was very noble. They said, in fact, I should credit the at that time it was Dr. Abdul Kalam. He was one of the key, I would say, principles behind this concept, and the chief scientific advisor for the Prime Minister, Dr. Arunachalam. He came in from Carnegie Mellon, and again, some of these people, the top-notch think tank, they put up this thought process to say that we need computer science as a those things in there. So when this came in, for me, hindsight 2020, I was fascinated in terms of something new coming up. It's also on the borders of electronics and instrumentation and computers. And then the best part was it's completely funded program. They used to give us a stipend.
I see.
And then right after that there was a job guarantee. So
and that too with DRDO.
That too with the DRDO.
A government job at that time.
It's a government job, and getting in as a scientist, it was very coveted. So it appeared to be a no-brainer at the time for us to.
I see. Who wouldn't want to do that?
Who wouldn't want to do that? But the competition was there, but it was all fine. But then they also invested a lot, in terms of. See, this is the time where they brought in the DEC Alpha machines.
Okay.
At the time it was very expensive. They gave all the universities good funding, good machines. They tied up with National Aeronautics Laboratories and few other laboratories so that they can, give the curriculum. They had tie-ups with the premium institutes like IASC and others. From there, they brought in lecturers and professors to train us all aboard. So it was a great program,
right?
And in fact, that gave me my first break. Right, wrong, or different. In fact, from there, no turning back. And this is the time where nothing was there, in the mainstream computing industry at that time.
Right, right. And then you worked with DRDO. Obviously, we can't talk about the projects that you worked on. But what prompted you to join HCL after that?
So it is very interesting because now I had a bond with DRDO, it's a 5-year bond. So then again, I was at the crossroads to say that how do I have to evolve? And then there were a few opportunities that were coming up, from outside of the DRDO, and the market was also evolving.
Right.
And then within the DRDO, I was working on a lot of computing technologies.
Right.
And then for me with HCL. At the time it was HCL Hewlett Packard R&D. I had to go into an adjacency which was basically what I wanted to get into, which is basically the communications and networking, which was evolving. So I didn't probably the DRDO, while it was good, I thought let me explore the outside world.
Okay.
To understand and get into some newer technology areas and newer research. So that prompted me to once I reached the crossroads of 5 years, then I switched from DRDO and then joined the HCL Hewlett Packard R&D, which is basically the HCL Tech today.
Right. Right. And with HCL, you were packed off to the US?
Absolutely. I mean, I would say it's another great company that I work for. In fact, they sent me to US to start a special products division.
Okay.
Along with a few others there at the time. I went to HCL America. Was managing several other projects there at the time. It was very, very, I would say, enlightening. Especially in terms of understanding how the technology industry works.
Right.
And also the time when I moved 1995 to the US, it's the time where the Silicon Valley itself was really brewing up. So I went to Sunnyvale, and I was in the heartland of Silicon Valley, so to speak, at the time. And then HCL did a lot of good projects with various other Silicon Valley biggies. So that was all excellent in terms of understanding, learning how the industry works, and also the Bay, San Francisco Bay Area was literally I would say the hotbed of all the technological advancements that was happening, the kind of startups, and it was mind-boggling in terms of getting exposed to all of that,
Right. But for nearly 2.5 decades, the time. Let's start with that point in time when you went to the US and you were in the Silicon Valley, and 2.5 decades since that point, the Indian IT industry has not really been known for coming up with products. We've mostly been the three big guys: TCS, Infosys, Wipro, HCL, all of these guys. They've been mostly focusing on services, but not products. Of course, now with all this startup culture coming in, Again, we are looking at products. But what happened during those 2.5, 3 years? What is your read? Why did products not take off?
So it is, I would probably, categorize more in terms of a necessity. When I say necessity, it is more of a market.
Okay.
Now, when you look at the companies, I would say they have to do what they have to do at that point in time.
Right.
Some of these companies also build products, like Wipro had their own suite of software products and solutions.
Right.
But they're all like domestic focused. And then when I say necessity, is like the domestic market hadn't evolved to the way it has evolved today. So their product outreach was limited, because the people at the time, if you look at it, the company was also economically going up step by step, and the need for some of those type of products were not there, Whereas if you look at some of the advanced countries, they were on the cusp of moving into the next levels and next levels, be it computing or be it something else, they were hungry in order to solve that context, either to simplify their lifestyle or getting into the next levels, and so those innovations happened again. As they say, necessity is the mother of invention.
Right.
And then for us, I feel like the firms that evolved at that stage, they took a stance to cater to probably a void, which basically is the human resources capabilities.
Right.
So we became a capability supplier,
right,
rather than a product innovator,
which is a natural extension of services business.
Exactly. I think that is slowly coming up. Today, if you look at this center, we evolved. When we started this center, 2008, we were an extension. It's an extended workbench,
right,
for many of the regions that we were supporting. Today we do independently all the products from here. We have a higher level of ownership on the products, and this is the same case in many of the other, I would say, global capability centers that's evolved, right? They are all doing it now. Probably it's a journey. Number one, I would say your domestic market. Today, I will take an example, the digital current payments. We are I would say, the front runner in the entire globe.
Absolutely.
Nobody else can come close to us, in terms of doing the digital payments. And that within a short span of 3-4 years, see the way the dramatic transformation that happened in terms of the innovations, the products, and the solutions that came in that industry, right? That's mind-boggling. So I think that's the thing. When people evolve, when the economies evolve, the necessity gets created, and then automatically that paves way for a market. Because today the market is the driver for products. When there is a market, then everybody will jump into start building those products there. So
right. So would you say that India is while the Western economies have been ahead of the curve in terms of software adoption, in terms of computing, India is bridging that gap on the curve?
I would say yes. It is. When I say yes, it's probably we are taking the steps in the right direction.
Okay.
In my opinion, because today, number one, I gave the digital payment as an example, but then there are a lot of startups. Today, India is one of the, I would say, third largest ecosystem for startups. That is something which is amazing. Now, a lot of times people may think, does all startups necessarily doesn't translate to a success. But then it's important to have that startups in place. People are now willing to take that risk.
That's right.
Which basically tells that they are confident that they would be evolved and catered to a domestic market. That is very, very important.
Right.
And then the second thing is also our overall exposure towards some of these things is much different than what it was 10-20 years back.
Right.
Today, if you look at it, we are one of the biggest countries with the largest young population.
Yes.
and then also one of the countries that where there's a lot of growth happening in terms of people moving from one strata to the other strata.
Right. Economic upward mobility.
Upward mobility is
Yes.
there. Now, between these two, I would say groups, there is going to be a lot of, I would say requirements and needs that will come into play.
Right.
So that will drive the demand, because the people who are moving into the next level of strata, the exposure coming up, their needs are increasing, so there will be a market demand that they will create.
Right.
The younger generation also, with their exposure and then kind of looking at things, they are aspiring to
aspirations are growing as well.
Other that's also growing.
That's
and that is basically no other country can cater to this with the domestic demand. I think our domestic demand at some point of time will surpass any other Western world.
Yep.
That's a good thing. Currently with the level of I would say top down, at least the way I view it is there is a lot of enablement that's happened in this country in terms of growing in that space there. So I think we are taking the right steps in the right direction.
Interesting. So in terms of we were just a minute back talking about building products out of India. My sense is to build products, you not just need entrepreneurs who would stick their necks out, take that risk, build those organizations, but you also need research and development, R&D mindset, maybe patents getting filed, things like that. So while we've talked a little about this entrepreneurship culture, which, the startup culture, which India is building up so fascinatingly fast, where do you think we stand on the R&D culture? How are our IITs? Our IITs have been accused of, just churning out engineers who would just work very well for others, but the innovative thinking, the patents. Government, I believe, has been spending a lot on funding researchers, but are the results showing? What is your take on R&D in India?
Couple of things, you had some of the interesting comments around the IITians. IITians, I think probably there was a brain drain that happened.
Yes,
most of the IITians are all
that's right.
inventing and producing for other parts of the world. Other countries are benefiting from that. Not us much. But I think these days it is changing. With I went to one of the technical innovation forums that IITs conduct, and they're coming up with a lot of this research around medical instruments and various other things, devices. It's a full spectrum of things that's happening. People are like I said, that in startup culture, there are a lot of young innovators are coming into play. Having said that, that culture has to go widespread across the pan India, because it's not only should be limited to certain premium institutes like IITs or NITs.
I agree.
Because we have close to 250,000+ engineers coming in every other day. The challenge there now, again, we are also trying to work with universities these days to strengthen some of that fabric is. It's I would say our mindset is doers mindset. Not definers mindset.
Okay.
So even within our organization, we are trying to, work on to transform people from doing
what they're told to defining how things could be. I see.
So when you want to become a defining organization or a defining mindset, there are a few things you need to understand. You need to be able to understand the big picture. You should be able to question the status quo and challenge the status quo. And that culturally people are order taking to just
they're comfortable being told
what to do. Then the third one is more important is just thinking beyond in terms of what you have been asked to do.
Okay.
What I'm saying is even today, a lot of engineers, they come in there. You do things, but then you need to have the quest of saying that how are we solving? What is the problem context?
Right.
Whatever I am working on, how is this going to solve that problem context? That's what I call as thinking beyond. In fact, it is not about creativity. It is about the imagination. That's more important. That will help them to visualize things which basically is not there today, but then how it will help some other areas, and can we do beyond breaking those boundaries and barriers. So that basically will form what is called as the defining mindset. But people are moving, people are evolving. A lot of people basically are trying to get to the point where it's not just about just programming, coding, or whatever it is, doing what you have been asked to do, but then trying to understand that larger context, because that triggers that chain reaction in terms of how can I come up with certain ideas like innovations and all that stuff that basically will help solve the problem.
You see, till date, the other thing is that you also have to look at what gets you paid. And till date, it's always been the problems of the West, if you could solve, right, through innovation or through a solution, that gets you paid. But but that's not an easy thing to do. Sitting here, solving for a problem in the US or some part of the Europe, some part of Europe, is not the best way of going about it. But increasingly, if working for Indians, working for Indian customers gets you paid, right, you're in a much better position to solve those problems. So I believe this mindset change will automatically happen as soon as the solutions for India they start getting innovators paid.
Absolutely.
Right? So you're right in the middle of thick of things, and you solve those problems. So I'm sure it's going to only get easier and faster.
It is. And even for the Western world today, what I'm looking at, maybe it's a matter of time. We use a lot of Western technology.
Right.
Which basically, be it on the phone side or which is, again, I'm using that because that's one of the most common thing that's coming up from an innovation perspective, because we are fast followers in many areas, but that situation will change. Especially the best classic thing is what happened on the digital payments.
Correct. We didn't wait for somebody else to show us what can happen.
Exactly. So that is in my opinion, there are certain things that's going to happen like that.
Right.
And then probably will immediately transform in a very rapid way. The whole way how people are thinking.
Right.
We have challenges, I agree, in terms of supporting some of these things. But then at some point of time, we would be able to supply a lot of our technology to the rest of the world.
Right.
The other classic example I would like to give us our space research.
Oh, yes.
That has gone to the forefront now, where we are not at the back seat anymore.
Yep.
A lot of people want to source our technology because we are cost effective and we also have pioneered things which they haven't, and they want to get there. Now the demand has got created in those areas. So it took us several decades to get there, but
we kept at it
dramatically. It all got flipped. Today, it is one of the few countries that's on the top of the world.
Yeah, we are sending Mars missions that are cheaper than movies which
absolutely
are about travel to Mars.
Yeah, if somebody had told you about this 2 decades back, you would have said no way.
Yeah.
But then now it's all happening, and then in fact a lot of these satellite imagery technologies that we have perfected, the granularity of some of those imaging technologies, that's also come out very well.
Right.
That is all there. I'm sure the next decade is something that we have to watch out for. Because I'm expecting a lot of such innovations coming in the autonomous vehicle space.
Right.
There is a big push, and a lot of entrepreneurs are coming in there, and probably in early stages. But I'm sure they will be able to solve a lot of global challenges and global problems.
Right.
Healthcare industry is another one where I see a lot of people are pioneering. Again, it will not show up now, but in a decade from now, I'm sure this country will be supplying a lot of these technologies to the rest of the world. I'm sure people would like to go look at how things are happening, because we solve problems in a way which others may not be able to solve.
Right.
When I say, what I mean is for them, they have the luxury of no cost barriers.
Yes.
So they have that freedom and flexibility. But for us, we have to, it's like a very cost sensitive market, and whatever you do, you need to take those parameters into consideration. So which means, whatever you do and innovate for here is going to be literally very valuable for the rest of the world.
In fact, drawing a parallel between the rest of the world, in fact, the Western world and India, how ISRO and some of our other innovations are taking off. I think a similar parallel exists between IITs and some of the regional universities and colleges, where while IITs are so well funded, I am also quite sure that some of these regional colleges are going to come up with talent and innovations that are going to just be, just straight out of necessity, that they are not so well funded. Maybe these young innovators are doing a lot more than, maybe what gets done in an IIT lab. And I think that's also something that we should just wait and watch.
Absolutely. I mean, I had seen a lot of this, I would say, free thinkers coming in from, I would say, like tier 2, tier 3 colleges.
Absolutely.
Which basically is really remarkable.
Absolutely.
It's more about providing them the opportunities. And then today, I'm part of the NASSCOM, and NASSCOM is also doing some efforts in terms of strengthening that academia and industry connect.
Okay.
One of the things that happens in the US, at least, and I can quote US, I think it should be in other parts of the world, is where the private institutions also fund these universities. It's not just the government.
Okay.
So I was part of the Georgia Tech, Research Institute.
Right.
And then we had a group, it's basically consortium of companies, and then we review the projects that's coming in there, and then we fund those projects.
Okay.
In terms of what they can do, so research projects and all that stuff. So Georgia Tech has $1 billion of research funding. I think probably that is something that we need to start coming up, in terms of how the industry academia can collaborate together.
Right.
Where certain funds can be available, not just purely IITs, but then you can cherry pick, few people from other organizations. Because at the end of the day, what happens is once the pathway is established, there will be more people coming in and then using those channels. Even if you identify one or two really the free thinkers and then the nuggets in those universities.
Right.
Then they will act as a catalyst for the rest to follow through. Because it's all about thinking. It should not be restricted to that. At the end of the day, the difference between IITs and others is they have been enabled to think in certain ways, and then that will help in other parts of the universities. And
I'm sure. I think alumni also play a very important role in that sense. In India, it's been the government which has been completely focused on funding these institutions of higher learning. The same thing I see government doing for skill development also. While we are talking software, I think government is doing a lot of work in skill development to ensure that the artisans, the manufacturing sector keeps getting in that trained manpower. But that can happen only until a point. Governments can do this funding only so far. They can help develop that ecosystem until that ecosystem starts getting powered on its own. Yeah. And in that sense, what you talked about, some of these institutions, Georgia Tech, it has got such a massive endowment from, I'm sure it's mostly alumni who are funding those endowments. Look at Harvard's funds, all of these guys. And now I see that starting to happen with IITs. There's, I believe, a 50-80 crore kitty that IITs generated from their alumni base. IIT Bombay, it was recently in the news. And once IITs believe that they need to adopt one or two institutions which can produce these nuggets. Yeah?
Absolutely, I think it is that's a very, very important aspect, primarily because number one, finding a model to because you cannot just only depend on, as you said, the government sources.
Right.
That's first thing. The second thing is also, in terms of breaking those barriers, again, why need to, even we have that bias. When we come in there, okay, we need to go only to a tier 1 college or tier 2 college. Somewhere I think we are also trying to see how we can enable, certain other, I would say while you can source from tier 1 or tier 2, you can also keep one or two other institutions in your pocket, and then start continuing to work on. As I said, like, it's a matter of establishing, some key, I would say, like, talent within those institutions, which basically will enable the rest of them as a catalyst. The second thing is, like, from a funding perspective, we still need to, again, industries, like we talk about CSRs and all that stuff, but then one of the biggest challenge that we see being in the technical side of it is, like, the services side, the growth is going to come down at some point of time. Because the demand from the Western world will come down, but then you need to have, like, really this, like, top-notch talent, that can do a lot of things in terms of, like, defining, understanding, and all that stuff. So which means, our there will be a big demand-supply gap for talent at that point of time, because people, they don't need services, but they need more free thinkers similar to IITs. So when it reaches that flipping point, I think it may be too late. So people will have to start now, so that, like, you can start strengthening that fabric, right now, so that in the next decade, like, when we are talking about all of that, the talent demand is key.
Yeah. And in that sense, you've already talked about machine learning, AI, and there a lot of, in a lot of ways, the spectrum of jobs that exists now, people can learn a specific language and get a job, would possibly not even exist in another 5 years, 10 years. So until you have that innovative mindset going for you, I think just an also ran who can do some kind of development, all of those tasks are already if not, they've already passed on to AI generators, they will be.
Correct.
So you can't plan for a job scene the way it looks like today.
Absolutely.
And that innovator's mindset that needs to set in right away, whatever level you are. And if that's not there, I believe people are going to struggle.
Absolutely. I think, rightfully said Gagan, like, the catalyst there is, like, people need to develop that higher order thinking skills.
Absolutely.
That is very, very important. And how do we enable them, early on from the get-go, those higher order thinking skills. Like, that's where I think, collectively, the academia and then the industry has to collaborate, because at some point of time, industry will, get into this catch-22 situation, because they may have a demand, but there is no supply of talent in the market. Academia will be challenged because, like, they can get people, but not the right people. So getting the right people needs, like, some amount of investment, in my opinion. Like, it's not necessarily money. It's all about, like, even if the industry can, like, just have certain programs where they can, send their folks to, like, at least, like, educate, expose to people in terms of what is happening. Because, one of the things that we talk in many of the NASCOM forums, and when we had the Industry Academia Connect, is even to look at the curriculum and see how things could be different. They still have a curriculum that could be, like, little bit archaic, but then things are moving so fast. So you need to bring in that the latest and greatest, like, industry context back to the academia, so that, like, they can quickly, like, learn from that.
I think in that sense, government is doing a great job. I'm not sure if you know that this new education policy, what it tries to do now is not just align the regular 10 plus 2 plus 4 plus 2 route into a formal channel, but it also allows for, any experience you've gained over the years. It allows that to be accounted for, and it allows for any artisanal talents you might have. So if you're a Drupad singer, you still, and you've done it for 14, 15 years, you still can be, equivalent to somebody who's gone the 10 plus 2 route. I think that's one of the things that's going to change things dramatically. But yes, in terms of creative thinking, in terms of being an innovator, I think a lot of onus lies on our primary schooling, our the parents, young parents. I believe all the young parents, they need to stop pushing their kids towards, that structured, you need to get a job, therefore you need to go to an IIT. I think that structure somehow, that mindset, that needs to change, that needs to be rebooted.
You are hitting another very, very important point, because I had an opportunity to stay in India during about 6 years. And I had to set this center up. So I brought my kids here, so they had a local education, my sons. Then we moved back to the US. So I asked my kids, after some time, what difference do you see? So he said in a very simple term, there, we have been asked to do things. Here we have not been asked to do things, but here we have to think, because there is no hand holding.
Right.
At the end of the day, so that the thing here, what is happening is if you have a textbook, you write to the textbook, you score.
You get a pat on the back.
Their pat on the back. Yeah. It's a highly pressurized system. Yeah. It's a lot of pressure there, but there that pressure is not there. Yeah. Up to 10th grade, they're all again, even early schooling and all the stuff. The focus is not just on academia. The focus is enabling you as a personality, so that you're able to understand the big picture. You're able to kind of take up the overall the context. And then also a discipline in terms of how you do things, structuring, all that stuff.
How you deliver around that.
Then the moment they go to the high school and colleges, they crank up the pressure. So now they have to deliver to the higher order with the basic fundamentals that they learned.
Right.
Whereas for us, from beginning get-go onwards, our focus is all around academia and then scoring and all that, which is important. But then we kind of miss out on the fundamentals. Now that's where when people had an education here, then go abroad and have an education there. Today, look at most of the top-notch leadership in many organizations. They're all the people who had an education here and had an education there. So they got the best of both worlds. They can withstand pressure.
Right.
At the same time, they learn how to structure, how to be disciplined, and how to look at other aspects. And then they are combining both of them to excel in those areas. I think probably we need to somehow get that recipe here, so not just focus on academia.
At the risk of being an apologist for the Indian education system, look at the kind of resources we've have had so far. We have been a poor country. There's just one teacher to 50 students, and what do you do? I believe for those times, things India has tried to do the best we can, but increasingly with AI, with all of these personalizations possible through technology, I believe the government and our educators, our policy makers have their hearts and minds in the right space, where I believe a lot of this personalization would now be possible. And we'll hopefully see the right kind of human resource explosion.
For me, the best part is as long as some of these programs come to fruition, I think we will see a sea of change here.
Right.
Because the thing is at the end of the day, as I keep saying, the people who are educated here are outsmarting the rest of the people who came through that system, because they got an opportunity to look at both of things. So somehow if we can get all of those recipes right, I think
we won't need to go out to make that difference.
We don't need to go out to make that difference at all.
We'll start creating our Sundar Pichais.
In fact, one of my other thing also the way the India is growing up, I'm sure several centuries back, India had been the hotbed for education. People used to come from rest of the world to get educated here.
Interesting you bring it up, because I was about to. You are a history aficionado. I mean, our conversations, I remember you talk a lot about, how things were, and you've been reading on that quite a bit, Indian culture. Why don't you take us through, I'm sure you've gone through the kind of education system we had previously. And I know we were expected to have a different conversation, but this is so interesting.
It's a very sensitive topic for me, because for me, I feel that again, right, wrong or different, I mean, somehow the last few decades, the way our education system was like, got like transformed. Maybe it is working in our current context, but then those days, the capabilities that I talked about, like in terms of free thinking, and defining and all the stuff, they were all there. Like, the part of the Gurukul system and all that stuff is primarily like, it's not just rote, it's also like, the capability building, in terms of how you create those free thinkers.
Right.
That was there. Then, and for me, my fascination towards history is like, is just to understand, who we really are, and what exactly is happening, and there is a lot of elements that we still don't understand. And then I cannot claim that I have like a greater knowledge. I'm still like, learning in this process through like, looking into like blogs and books and all that stuff, articles, etc., etc. But then for me, it's a very, very, I would say, important topic that we as Indians should really understand, because at the end of the day, we need to connect the dots that basically takes us back. While modernization is important, if we are able to bring back some of the best practices that used to be there, like in olden times, I think that will help us, like, even outperform, many people. Like, we don't want to become stereotypes. Today, we try to do things because there is a necessity and then there is a demand. But then we need to probably like, look beyond that to say that like, how can we become the leaders, so that, we became different in terms of this. Because a lot of times it becomes philosophical because like, we only look at one dimension, right? Especially growth, technology, or like, growing certain things.
Right.
They are all materialistic in my opinion, like, but then the other aspect is where like, India was excelling, and then a lot of people still, they have the disconnect, because at the end of the day, without that, the spiritual aspects, it will not, your material aspects, only play so much. And that's where like, our country was, so great in terms of having, so many, thoughts, evolutions around like,
some of the world's biggest libraries.
Absolutely. Like, and then the concepts, I mean, I'll take an example of like, the concepts like Dvaita, Advaita, all of that.
Oh yes.
They are like, literally mind-boggling concepts, like, in terms of how
you can spend lifetimes trying to absorb these concepts.
Exactly. Yeah. And that is amazing, because how they came up with some of those things, and it evolves. And again, I'm just using that as examples, but then there are like hundreds of such, theorizations in terms of people come up with those philosophies, right? And that is not easy, because that's abstractions, and that needs like higher level of thinking. And then the capabilities are there. It's more of like, we somehow got, I would say, robotically, programmed to follow one path, and then we need to break away.
I think we underwent a time when we were looking at the West as the leaders, as better than us. But I think over the last decade or so, we've started to find that Indianness and starting getting more and more taking pride in ourselves. Because I think, while it might, we don't want the conversation to get very political, but while taking pride in, being an Indian can become very a political idea, but that's so important to probably look at, you talk about Nalanda, for example. So that was a university, the Gurukul system, that was a structure that we had that's so aligned with Indianness.
Yep.
Right? And it's not just philosophy, it's not just specifically what concepts you learn, but also as a society. We are so different, and the system we had was so streamlined, so aligned with the Gurukul system, for example, was so aligned with the social structure that we used to have. Some of it which we already we still continue to have. Living with your parents is not as taboo, probably as in a Western system. So we still have those remnants of whatever Indianness we had, and if we start to take pride, if we start to find those concepts and get ourselves aligned, I think the latest concepts they're just what comes out of it.
Absolutely. I mean,
It's the system that we probably need to find, align, and find that Indian sweet spot for ourselves.
Absolutely. And for that, I feel like, people need to have the trust. A lot of times, I mean, when did this system start? We've seen a lot of distortions happen, through various invasions.
Right.
I don't want to go back to the timeline, but somewhere down, people started putting in what they know, what they think they know is best basically was enforced. And then over a period of time, probably after 2-3 generations, you forget about what you had, and then you live with those enforcements.
Right.
And then slowly that it tends to distort, and then the distortion becomes into kind of like a mainstream. I mean, today, in my opinion, we somehow accepted, and then going with that. It's a matter of a few experiments has to happen around how things could work, and then prove that that system is able to build up much more enriching talent, that basically caters to some of the things that's happening there. So over a period of time, that system will change. I think it will be cyclical. It's a matter of time where people understand that is happening, because I mean, today if you look at it, for me, one of the other motivation is there is always that quest in terms of how things could have been different. Anyway, we came through that system, but then we are trying to kind of look for that lost connection and lost path. I'm sure there will be a lot of people on the same, I would say, situation. Some would be much more, I would say, ahead in terms of taking that leap of faith and then doing things. Because I know a few friends, they wanted to think differently, enroll their sons in some Gurukulams. There are Gurukulams in Rishikesh, and all this stuff. So they did that, because it is happening. See, I think over a period of time, this adaptation, if it starts happening, and then the trust around that system starts building up, then people will know. Because at the end of the day, all of this is about how you cater to a certain needs. And today, the needs are defined by what we see. Are it's a framework that was created that was enforced on us. We are living through it, and I'm sure in a decade from now, when India itself becomes its own, I would say
entity
in my opinion.
Identity and entity.
You don't need to depend on the rest of the world. I think by the time a lot of these things will start happening.
I think as you remember the time we were passing out, getting a job was such an important thing, because obviously our parents had a certain amount of money coming in every month, and that's the best they could have done. The best they could have done was they could do was support us in our education, and then you got to strike it on your own. These days, I believe if you talked about economic upward mobility, increasingly parents are getting more comfortable with letting their children experiment, not worry about an IIT entrance, and take a couple of years off. I think the next step is going to be that parents start allowing their children to go to Gurukulam, because you don't need to worry about how much money you need to make right after you pass out at an age of 22 or something.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think probably a lot of that maturation will start coming up. Once they reach a point where they
hopefully we'll see that in our next generation.
Absolutely. I think so.
Yeah. Great, Ganesh. Thank you so much. This was such a fascinating conversation. Thank you for your time. Thank you for your insights. I believe our viewers have learned quite a bit on what's the kind of mindset that you need for future. I mean, not getting too technical, but the kind of mindset you need for success in a future where India is leading the path on so many fronts. So thank you so much for your time today.
Thanks, Gagan. I appreciate that. Thanks for this opportunity.
Thank you so much.